My name is Lucy Bennett. I'm 31 years old, and the first time I understood how badly my family wanted me erased, I was sitting alone in a cafe 3 blocks from the courthouse with a lukewarm coffee in front of me and a folder thick enough to end a life of lies. Across the room, my sister sat with our parents as if they were waiting for a celebration dinner, not a court hearing. She didn't need to say much. The way she checked her watch, the way my parents leaned toward her, the way their lawyer kept tapping his pen against a leather briefcase told me everything. They believed the story was already finished. I was the careless daughter, the jealous sister, the woman who had no attorney beside her because no serious person would stand with me. What they didn't know was that I had chosen to walk in alone. My attorney had filed everything quietly and stayed off the visible record until the judge requested sealed material, because if my family saw him too early, they would delay, destroy, or deny. Alone, I looked weak. That was the trap. As I watched them, old memories did not come back like thoughts. They appeared like a film projected over the cafe glass. My name removed from documents, my work handed to someone else, my grandparents being told I was unstable. Then the film stopped, and I saw only my own reflection. Today, I wasn't asking to be loved. I was taking back the voice they stole. Before I tell you what the judge said and what happened after I walked out, tell me, what time is it for you right now? Where are you watching from? And what's the weather like where you are? I'm curious to see how far this story will travel. The walk from the cafe to the courthouse should have taken 7 minutes, but every block felt like a hallway in a house I had spent my entire life trying to escape. Nancy Bennett, my older sister by 3 years, had always understood performance better than truth. In family pictures, she knew where to stand, so the light found her first. In conversations, she knew when to lower her voice, so a lie sounded like concern. And in the months after our grandparents died, she had learned how to turn grief into paperwork. The first crosswalk flashed white, and I remembered being 17, standing in our grandparents' kitchen with a notebook full of medication schedules I had made for Grandpa after his stroke. Nancy had arrived late, kissed Grandma on the cheek, and said, "I told Lucy how to organize all that." Grandma had smiled at her with tired gratitude. I said nothing because I was young and still believed silence kept peace. The second crosswalk turned red, and I remembered being 22, working a double shift while Nancy told Mom and Dad I had skipped a family meeting because I couldn't handle responsibility. I found out later that the meeting was about our grandparents' first estate plan, the one that named both of us equally. Nancy had taken my absence and made it into evidence against me. By the time I reached the courthouse steps, the morning air had a dry bite to it. My fingers were cold, but not from fear. Inside my shoulder bag were copies of emails, bank transfers, a handwriting report, and one flash drive my lawyer called the fuse. There was also a letter in Grandma's handwriting, folded inside a plastic sleeve, where she had written one sentence I had read so many times the words felt burned behind my eyes. Lucy carried this family when everyone else wanted credit for standing near the burden. Nancy did not know I had that letter. Mom and Dad did not know I had recordings. Their lawyer did not know that the final will Nancy was defending had a signature copied from an old medical authorization form and a notary stamp linked to an office closed on the date listed. That was why I could walk alone. Not because I had no help, but because the truth had already entered the building before I did. When the metal detector beeped, the guard asked me to step back. I removed my belt, my watch, and the small silver locket Grandma had given me the year before she died. For 1 second, as the locket sat in the plastic tray, I saw another overlay of memory. Grandma's hand closing over mine, her nails pale, her voice thin but certain. "Don't let Nancy turn kindness into weakness, sweetheart." Back then, I had laughed softly and told her Nancy was family. Grandma had looked away like she knew something I didn't. In the hallway outside courtroom 6B, I saw Nancy again. She wore cream, the kind of color people choose when they want to look innocent. Mom sat beside her, twisting a pearl bracelet. Dad stood near the wall, pretending to study a notice board, but I noticed he wouldn't look directly at me. Nancy's lawyer, Mr. Thompson, smiled when he saw me. It was not a friendly smile. It was the professional smile of a man who believed he had been paid to crush someone quickly. Nancy leaned toward Mom and whispered something. I could not hear every word, but I caught enough. She'll cry before lunch. Mom lowered her eyes. Dad coughed into his fist. No one defended me. That tiny silence did more than insult me. It reminded me why I had stopped hoping for rescue. When the bailiff opened the courtroom door, Nancy rose first, as if she were the bride at a wedding. Mr. Thompson carried one slim folder. I carried a banker's box in my shoulder bag. He looked at the box, then at me. His expression flickered, but only for a breath. Preparing a scrapbook, Ms. Bennet? He asked. I looked at him and said, something like that. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, which made every sound sharper. Shoes against wood, papers sliding, a chair scraping when Nancy sat down too hard. I took my place at the table alone. That was the image they wanted the judge to see. Nancy surrounded by family and counsel, Lucy isolated, emotional, easy to dismiss. But the mirror had already begun to turn. Every step that had brought me here carried a memory, and every memory had a document waiting to answer it. When Judge Harold Mercer entered, every person stood, and for one clean second the room became honest. Not kind, not safe, but honest. No one could whisper over the sound of the gavel. No one could pretend a family dinner was the same thing as a sworn statement. We sat, and Judge Mercer reviewed the case summary with a calm expression that revealed nothing. Estate of Evelyn and Robert Bennet. Petition to validate amended will. Objection by Lucy Bennet. Allegations of undue influence, financial manipulation, and document irregularity. Hearing on evidentiary admissibility and preliminary ruling. The words sounded sterile, but each one contained a bruise. Mr. Thompson stood first. He buttoned his jacket, walked to the center of the courtroom, and began shaping Nancy into a monument. He called her devoted, responsible, the natural choice. He said our grandparents had trusted her judgment because she was stable, successful, and consistently present during their final years. At that, Nancy lowered her eyes like a saint in a painting. I watched Mom dab the corner of her eye, not because she was moved, but because she knew how sympathy looked. Mr. Thompson continued, explaining that the amended will left the brownstone, the investment accounts, and the lake property primarily to Nancy because she had earned that confidence. According to him, I had appeared only after death, motivated by resentment. He suggested I was representing myself because no reputable attorney believed my claim had merit. That was when Nancy's mouth curved. She leaned back, barely moving her lips. You came without an attorney, she whispered, just loud enough for me. You've already lost. I didn't look at her. I looked at Mr. Thompson's folder. One folder for an entire estate. One folder for 2 dead people, 30 years of family history, and a signature that had been stolen from a medical file. When he finished, the judge turned toward me. Ms. Bennet, are you proceeding without counsel today? The room waited for my humiliation. I stood. Your Honor, I am appearing personally for opening remarks. My counsel of record has filed under seal and is available at the court's request. I chose not to have him speak first because the facts in this case begin with my lived knowledge, and the documents will follow. Mr. Thompson's smile tightened. Nancy's head snapped toward me. Judge Mercer looked down at his docket, then back at me. Proceed carefully. I nodded. I intend to. I did not begin with a speech about being ignored. I began with a date. March 14th, 3 years before Grandma died. That was the day my sister sent an email to my grandparents claiming I had mishandled money from their household account. She attached a spreadsheet and said she had corrected my mistakes. I opened my binder and held up a printed page. The spreadsheet was mine. The original file metadata shows I created it 2 weeks earlier from my work computer. My sister changed the author name and forwarded it as her own. A murmur moved through the back row. Nancy scoffed, but too quickly. Mr. Thompson stood. Your Honor, metadata without foundation. You'll have an opportunity, Judge Mercer said. Let her establish the timeline. I turned the page. June 2nd. My sister told our parents I refused to visit Grandpa after his fall. That same evening, I paid the invoice for his in-home aid because the agency threatened to suspend service. Here is the receipt, my bank record, and the aide's text message thanking me. Dad shifted in his seat. I could feel him staring at the back of my head, but I did not turn around. The mirror was working now. For every pretty story Mr. Thompson told, I placed a date beside it. For every claim that Nancy had been present, I showed where I had been doing the work while she performed the gratitude. Nancy's face hardened. She leaned toward Mom again, but this time her whisper was not soft enough. She's making herself look pathetic. The judge won't care. Judge Mercer's pen stopped moving. He looked up. Nancy froze. That moment mattered. Not because it proved my case, but because it let the court see the real person behind the cream-colored dress. I continued before anyone could rescue her. Your Honor, I am not here to compete over who was loved more. I'm here because the amended will being defended today was created after months of isolation, pressure, and false information. My grandparents were told I was negligent, greedy, and mentally unstable. Those accusations were not misunderstandings, they were strategy. Mr. Thompson's face lost a shade of color. Ms. Bennett is making very serious allegations. Yes, I said, looking at the judge, and I brought serious proof. The judge allowed me to continue, but his warning was clear. Emotion would not be enough. That was fine. I had run out of emotion years ago. What remained was record. The first mirror, I said, is responsibility. I placed 3 enlarged copies on the evidence table. My sister claimed she handled our grandparents' daily care. Here are the caregiver schedules. My name appears as emergency contact on 46 appointments. Nancy's appears on 4. Here are pharmacy pickup logs. My signature appears for insulin, blood pressure medication, and post-surgery antibiotics. Nancy's signature appears once, the day a photographer came to take holiday photos for our parents' anniversary slideshow. Someone in the gallery whispered, "Oh my God." Nancy snapped, "Because you liked acting useful." The room went still. Mr. Thompson turned toward her with a warning look. I let her words hang there before I answered. No, Nancy, I liked keeping Grandpa alive. Mom inhaled sharply, and for the first time I heard pain in it. Not compassion for me, maybe, but recognition. She remembered. They all did. They remembered calling me when Grandma's blood pressure spiked, when Grandpa fell in the bathroom, when the electric bill was overdue because Dad had forgotten, when Nancy was too busy at a networking event, or too tired from a conference, or too important for ordinary emergencies. The second mirror is money, I continued. My sister told our grandparents I was irresponsible with finances. Here are 12 months of transfers from my account to theirs, labeled utilities, home aid, property tax installment, and grocery delivery. Here are text messages from Grandma asking me not to tell Mom and Dad because she didn't want them embarrassed. I swallowed once, but I did not let my voice break. I kept their dignity while Nancy sold them the story that I was the threat. Mr. Thompson stood again. Your Honor, financial help does not invalidate a will. Correct, Judge Mercer said, but undue influence may. His eyes moved to me. Keep going. Nancy's chair creaked. Her confidence had not disappeared yet. It had changed shape. Now it looked like anger. She stared at me as if I had broken an unwritten rule by documenting my own life. Have you ever been the person who cleaned up the disaster, paid the bill, made the call, carried the secret, and then watched someone else get praised for standing in front of the wreckage after it was safe? If you have, then you know why my hands were steady. I was not brave because I felt no fear. I was brave because I had receipts for the pain. The third mirror is reputation, I said. This is where the case changes. I placed a transcript on the clerk's desk, along with a flash drive. A recording was made legally during a family meeting in my grandparents' sunroom. I was not present. My grandmother's home security system captured audio because the front door camera microphone had been left active. In that recording, Nancy tells Grandma and Grandpa that I had been asking about selling the brownstone, that I wanted cash quickly, and that I had called them burdens. None of that was true. Nancy stood halfway up. That is private family conversation. Sit down, Judge Mercer said. His voice was quiet, which made it worse. Nancy sat. Mr. Thompson asked to review the transcript. The clerk handed him a copy. He scanned the first page, then the second. His jaw tightened. I watched the exact moment he realized he had not been given the full truth by his own client. That is a special kind of silence. When a paid defender suddenly understands he may be defending a lie too large to control. The judge allowed a short portion of the recording to play. Grandma's fragile voice filled the courtroom first. Lucy would never say that. Then Nancy's voice, smooth and impatient. You don't see what she says when you're not around. She thinks you're taking up her life. I'm the only one trying to protect you. The recording crackled. Grandpa coughed. Then Nancy again, colder. If you leave things equal, she'll sell everything before your bodies are cold. A sound escaped Mom. Dad lowered his face into his hand. Nancy whispered, "That's edited." But her whisper shook. Judge Mercer looked at her. You will have your opportunity to testify under oath. The words under oath landed like a door locking. I faced the bench and continued. That recording was made 6 weeks before the amended will. During those 6 weeks, my grandparents stopped answering my calls. When I came to the house, Nancy told me they were resting. When I asked the nurse, she said she had been instructed not to give me updates because I was agitating the family. That instruction did not come from a doctor. It came from Nancy. Mr. Thompson objected, but weaker this time. Judge Mercer overruled in part and asked me for supporting documentation. I had it. A text from the nurse, a voicemail from Grandma saying, Lucy, I don't know what's happening, but they say you're angry with us. A delivery photo showing groceries I had ordered left outside because no one opened the door. The courtroom no longer felt like a place where my worth was on trial. It felt like a room where the walls were finally repeating what I had been saying for years. The fourth mirror was the will itself. That was the mirror Nancy had never expected me to hold up because, for years, she had trained everyone to believe I was too emotional to understand documents. Your Honor, I said, the amended will presented by my sister leaves her approximately 80% of the estate, including the brownstone and lake property. It leaves me a small cash gift and states that my grandparents made this decision because I had shown repeated hostility toward family obligations. That phrase matters. I removed Grandma's old letter from its sleeve, but I did not submit it first. I wanted the phrase to burn before I showed the water. Repeated hostility toward family obligations, I said again. Those are not my grandmother's words. She never spoke like that. She wrote birthday cards in complete paragraphs. She underlined words she loved. She called chores acts of care. She would not describe caring for a sick husband as a family obligation. Judge Mercer leaned forward. Do you have evidence related to drafting? Yes, Your Honor. I presented an email chain obtained through subpoena from the estate planning office. Mr. Thompson's head lifted sharply. He had not known about the subpoena because my attorney had filed it before the hearing under a limited discovery order after Nancy failed to produce the original drafting communications. The email shows that Nancy sent suggested language to the paralegal before the amended will was prepared. The phrase repeated hostility toward family obligations appears in her message. The same phrase appears in the amended will. The judge looked at Mr. Thompson. Counsel? Mr. Thompson opened his mouth, then closed it. He needed time, and he had none. I continued. The fifth mirror is the signature. I handed over the handwriting report. The signature on the amended will is attributed to Grandma. A forensic document examiner compared it to 20 known signatures. The examiner found significant inconsistencies in pressure, formation, and tremor pattern. More importantly, one portion of the signature matches a medical authorization form signed 8 months earlier with near-perfect overlay alignment. The judge took the report. Are you alleging forgery? The entire room seemed to shrink around this word. I felt Nancy's eyes on me like heat. I am alleging that the signature requires investigation and should not be accepted as valid without scrutiny. But there is more. I presented the notary record. The notary stamp lists April 9th. The notary's office was closed that day due to a flood in the building. We have the building management notice, the notary's own affidavit, and entry logs showing no appointments. Mr. Thompson's face drained. He turned the pages with hands that were no longer graceful. Wait, he said under his breath. This can't be right. That sentence moved through the courtroom like electricity. Nancy heard it. Mom heard it. Dad heard it. I heard the hook of my entire life snap loose. Their lawyer, the man who had walked in ready to humiliate me, was looking at the file as if it had bitten him. Judge Mercer noticed too. Mr. Thompson, approach the bench. The attorneys conferred quietly. My lawyer, Daniel Reeves, entered from the back at the judge's instruction and identified himself as my counsel of record. Nancy looked at him like he had stepped out of a wall. You said you were alone, she hissed. I turned slightly. I said I came alone. I didn't say the truth, did. Daniel submitted the sealed packet. Affidavits, chain of custody statements, the forensic examiner's credentials, and the financial review. The sixth mirror was money after death. A review of estate-adjacent accounts showed that 2 weeks after the amended will was allegedly signed, Nancy had transferred $38,000 from Grandma's personal savings into a home maintenance reserve account she controlled. She told our parents it was for repairs. The invoices she later produced were from a contractor whose business license had expired, and the mailing address matched the apartment of one of Nancy's former coworkers. That is a lie! Nancy shouted. I protected that house while Lucy did nothing. Judge Mercer's gaze sharpened. Ms. Bennett, you will control yourself. But Nancy had started sliding, and the slope was steep. She doesn't deserve that house, Nancy said, pointing at me. She was always the backup daughter, the emergency contact, the errand girl. Grandma felt sorry for her, that's all. The words landed harder than any objection, not because they hurt me, though they did, but because she had finally said in public what my family had practiced in private. Nancy, Mom whispered, stop. Nancy spun toward her. No, Mom, you stop. You and Dad were fine with this when it benefited you. You let me handle it because you knew Lucy would fold. She always folds. The judge's gavel cracked. Enough. But the damage was done. Mr. Thompson looked like a man watching his case burn from the inside. Dad stared at Nancy as if seeing his favorite child had required a room full of strangers and a court reporter. And I stood there with a strange calm settling over me. Sometimes revenge does not look like screaming. Sometimes it looks like letting someone talk long enough to reveal the knife in their own hand. The judge called a recess, but nobody moved at first. The courtroom had become a glass box, and every person inside it was afraid to breathe too loudly. Nancy sank back into her chair, her face pale beneath her makeup. Mr. Thompson bent toward her and spoke fast, angry whispers meant to keep a client from committing further professional disaster. Mom reached for Dad's sleeve, but he pulled away. I saw that. I saw the tiny betrayal travel across Mom's face. For years, they had stood behind Nancy because supporting her cost them less. She made them feel proud at parties. She dressed success in a way they understood. I had been useful, but usefulness is not glamorous. Now the glamorous daughter had admitted the family system out loud. When court resumed, Daniel Reeves stood beside me. He did not take over my story, he anchored it. Your Honor, he said, given the evidence already before the court and Ms. Nancy Bennett's statements, we move for immediate preservation orders over estate assets, temporary suspension of Ms. Bennett's authority under any contested instrument, and referral of the signature and notary issues for investigation. Mr. Thompson objected, but his argument had lost its spine. He claimed misunderstanding. He claimed family stress. He claimed the transfers were protective. Then the judge asked Nancy one question. Did you send suggested language to the estate planning office describing Lucy Bennett as hostile toward family obligations? Nancy looked at her lawyer. Mr. Thompson closed his eyes briefly. She had to answer. I sent background information, she said. Answer the question. Yes. The word came out like broken glass. Judge Mercer asked, did your grandparents independently use that phrase before you submitted it? Nancy's mouth opened, but no sound came. I don't remember. Daniel handed another exhibit to the clerk. Your Honor, we have a draft message from Ms. Nancy Bennett's cloud backup, produced under subpoena, where she writes, if they repeat that exact wording, it sounds legal and less emotional. The judge read it. Mr. Thompson rubbed his forehead. Nancy's eyes filled, but not with remorse. It was rage wearing tears as a disguise. You hacked me, she said to me. Daniel answered, court order. She laughed once, sharp and ugly. You think this makes you better than me? You were nothing without this family. I made sure people respected our name. I looked at her, and finally asked the question I had kept buried. Whose name, Nancy? The family's or yours? She had no answer, so she attacked the only place she had ever known how to attack. Grandma was confused. Grandpa barely knew what day it was. I did what had to be done because you were too soft. You would have given everything away to nurses and bills and charity and every sad little cause Grandma cared about. The room went cold. Judge Mercer looked up slowly. Are you stating that your grandparents lacked capacity when the amended will was signed? Nancy froze. Mr. Thompson stood so fast his chair hit the table. Your Honor, my client is upset and not testifying formally. She is making statements in open court, the judge said. And they are relevant. Daniel moved with quiet precision. Your Honor, the capacity argument is significant. If Nancy Bennett now claims her grandparents were confused, then her position that they knowingly executed a dramatic amendment benefiting her becomes even more suspect. Nancy realized the trap too late. Her face collapsed for 1 second, then twisted. That's not what I meant. It is exactly what you meant, Dad said. His voice was low, but the whole room heard him. Everyone turned. Dad stood slowly, as if his age had doubled during the hearing. You told us Lucy was upsetting them. You told us she wanted money. You told us the new will was Grandma's idea. Nancy stared at him, stunned. Dad, don't. He looked at me then, and shame made him look smaller than I had ever seen him. Lucy, did you pay the aid in October? The one we thought Nancy arranged? I nodded once. He covered his mouth. Mom began crying, but I no longer had the energy to translate her tears. Were they guilt? Embarrassment? Fear that the wrong daughter had been exposed? It didn't matter. Nancy stood again. "You're all cowards," she said. "You loved the results when I handled everything. You loved not having to answer calls. You loved letting Lucy do the dirty work and letting me make it look clean." That was the line that severed the room. Mom looked at Nancy not like a daughter but like evidence. Dad stepped away from her table and sat behind me. It was not reconciliation. It was not forgiveness. But it was the first time in my life he had physically chosen the truth over comfort. Nancy saw it, and that was when she truly began to lose. Not the house, not the accounts, her audience, her reflection, her throne. Judge Mercer ordered Nancy to sit, then address the court. "The pattern emerging here is not sibling rivalry. It is a documented course of isolation, misrepresentation, and potential fraud affecting vulnerable elders and the administration of their estate." Mr. Thompson whispered to Nancy, likely advising silence. She ignored him. "This is my inheritance," she said. "I earned it." Judge Mercer's face hardened. Inheritance is not earned by poisoning the well from which everyone else is allowed to drink. The final ruling did not come like thunder. It came like a blade being placed carefully on a table. Judge Mercer reviewed the evidence piece by piece, the copied language, the suspicious signature, the closed notary office, the recording, the account transfers, Nancy's own statements, and the original estate plan naming both sisters equally. Then he looked directly at my sister. "The court will not validate an instrument surrounded by credible evidence of manipulation and potential fraud," he said. Nancy gripped the edge of the table. Mr. Thompson stopped taking notes. "The amended will is rejected for purposes of today's petition. The prior estate plan is reinstated pending final probate review. Additionally, Ms. Nancy Bennett is temporarily removed from any fiduciary role connected to the estate. All estate assets are frozen except for necessary preservation expenses approved by the court. The disputed transfers will be traced. If funds were misappropriated, restitution will be ordered." Nancy whispered, "No." Judge Mercer continued, "Given the evidence regarding the signature and notary irregularities, this matter will be referred to the appropriate authorities for investigation. Ms. Lucy Bennett's documented personal expenditures for elder care, property protection, and medical support will be reviewed for reimbursement from the estate before distribution." My breath left me slowly, not as a sob, as a release. For years, I had imagined justice as someone finally saying, "Lucy was right." But this was bigger than being right. The court had taken Nancy's weapon away. The house she had posed in front of, the accounts she had planned to control, the story she had sharpened until it cut everyone but her. All of it was now out of her hands. Nancy stood too quickly. "You can't do this," she said to the judge. "They wanted me to have it. They trusted me." Judge Mercer looked at her for a long moment. "Ms. Bennett, trust obtained through fear is not trust. A legacy built on deception is not inheritance. It is evidence." That was the sentence, the one that made Nancy's confidence completely collapse. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. The color drained from her face. Mom reached for her, and Nancy slapped her hand away. The sound cracked across the courtroom. Dad rose. "Don't touch your mother." Nancy laughed, but it broke halfway through. "Now you care? Now all of you care because Lucy brought a box of paper?" She turned toward me. "You ruined me." I looked at her, and for the first time, I did not feel the old pull to explain myself until she approved. "No," I said. "I documented you." The bailiff stepped closer when Nancy lunged toward the table, not enough to reach me but enough to make the room gasp. Mr. Thompson caught her arm and hissed, "Stop talking." She tried to pull away. She stole my life. Judge Mercer ordered the bailiff to escort her out if she could not remain calm. Nancy looked around, searching for the faces that used to save her. Mom was crying into both hands. Dad stood behind my chair. Mr. Thompson was packing his folder with the stiff movements of a man already thinking about withdrawing from representation. No one came. That was her real punishment. Not just the money, not just the investigation, not even the public humiliation. It was the moment she realized the stage had gone dark, and the audience she had trained for years had finally seen the wires. As the bailiff guided her toward the side aisle, she looked smaller, but not softer. Some people do not collapse into regret. They collapse into exposure. Judge Mercer gave final instructions. Asset freeze, document preservation, no contact regarding estate matters. Follow-up hearing in 30 days. Then he turned to me. Ms. Bennett, this court recognizes the burden you carried in bringing these matters forward. Continue through counsel from this point. It was the closest a judge could come to saying, "You were heard." I nodded because words would have failed me. Outside the courtroom, Mom tried to speak. "Lucy, I didn't know it was that bad." I looked at her and saw every year I had begged her to know. "You didn't want to know," I said. She cried harder, but I did not move to comfort her. Dad said my name, then stopped. He seemed to understand that apology is not a broom. It cannot sweep years clean in one hallway. "I'm sorry," he finally said. "I should have listened." I answered, "Yes, you should have." Then I walked away before either of them could turn my pain into their redemption scene. On the courthouse steps, the afternoon light hit the silver locket at my throat. For once, it did not feel like a memory of Grandma. It felt like proof that she had not been fooled as completely as Nancy believed. I thought about the brownstone, the lake property, the money, the hearings still ahead. I knew the fight wasn't entirely over. Lawyers would file motions. Investigators would ask questions. Nancy would try to reinvent herself as the victim. But something irreversible had happened. The family mirror had cracked, and everyone had seen what stood behind it. I came to court alone because they needed to believe I had no one. I left with the truth on record. Nancy removed from power. My parents facing the cost of their silence, and my grandparents' legacy pulled back from the hands that tried to steal it. If you have ever been underestimated because you were quiet, remember this: silence is not emptiness. Sometimes silence is where the evidence waits. And when the right moment comes, you do not have to scream to win. You only have to open the file.
Our team works carefully on each script to create stories that entertain viewers while also sharing meaningful life lessons. Everything in this video is fictional and created only for storytelling, education, and reflection. We hope it reminds everyone watching that justice can sometimes come from silence, patience, and personal growth.